Hi, how are you? Welcome to the Food Design Festival. We have with us Emilie Baltz. I hope I pronounced it right. She's a multi-sensory artist. To make it short, I will say that I think she founded the first food design studio at Pratt University, I suppose. I used to teach at Pratt Graphic Center in Santo Domingo. And she's an expert in multisensory experiences. And I think you are going to talk today about storytelling, right? So go ahead. Emil, we are ready for your information and your show and see what you have to tell us.
Thank
Welcome.
you so much. Thank you. And just to confirm, I have 30 minutes. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Emilie Baltz. I am a French-American multisensory artist and designer. And today I wanted to share a selection of my projects from the last 15 years that helped define, I think, a bit in culture what the discipline of food design has come to be, as well as helped me retell a new story of food to myself. I'm going to share some slides here. Let me see if I can find it quickly. There we go. Here we are. Hold on, everybody. It says that I have to open my system preferences. Think anybody can help me here? We have some problems here because I can't share my screen. I maybe have to stop and try this on a different computer. Is anybody out there? Second, thank you, audience. The world of technology has not allowed us to do this. I'm gonna share my presentation. One second. I'll do this. And okay. I'm sending over a presentation. And if only I could mail all of you this presentation and you could see it. Okay, so while that's loading, I'll give you a little bit of background on myself. So in the late 90s, I studied screenwriting and contemporary dance just north of New York City. And I've always been really interested in stories and how we tell stories as culture, and also how we experience stories as people and bodies. And so the foundation of my work, I always think, goes back to that foundation of education, learning how to tell stories, through script writing, through kind of a linear traditional form of storytelling, through 2 dimensions, through the moving picture, as well as, I would say, 3 and 4 dimensions, because dance is also a form of storytelling, one of our first forms of storytelling that predates, most of our present civilization, and teaches you how to communicate with your body in space and also coordinate that storytelling with other people. So for me, that foundation really laid a groundwork for exploring how else we could tell stories to fuel different and new imagination in our society, as well as in ourselves. Thereafter, I got a degree in industrial design in 2005 at Pratt Institute, and focused my work there on exploring how food could be used as a material for design. You'll see my face right here. Thank you so much, Juan. And through that work, I really grounded my own practice in this statement that we enter the world through our senses. And if we start to change our relationship to them, we discover new worlds. If we think about how our senses build our perception, we can also start to understand that how we see, how we smell, what we feel, what we taste starts to build the stories of our lives. It's how we learn the world as children. We put everything in our mouth, right? We learn that we smell something, it means something. And that goes on to narrate the rest of the stories that we experience and the stories that we become as human beings. I think also the second line here, the stories that we feel are the stories that we remember. So I was interested in dedicating that. And maybe, you know what, I'll just say next slide when I'm ready to click to the next slide. Thank you. And so I was interested in exploring not just stories that we write on paper, not just stories that we see on stages, but stories that we feel, that we experience. And food, being our only multi-sensory material on Earth, is one of the most powerful vehicles to deliver stories through. Because when we eat, we don't just taste, we smell, we see, we hear, and obviously we feel. So that's a practice. If you go to the next slide, that you'll see leads me in this wonderful photograph to put candy on my face and explore how food can be used as a material for storytelling. If we could go to the next slide, you'll see that a majority of the work that I've ended up doing more recently in the last 10 years has landed in events and entertainment. So I straddle between some commercial work and then also arts and culture work. I live in America and I'm interested in that duality as well, as what industry can create in culture alongside what institutional and traditional forms of arts can also bring to culture. So you'll see on the next slide, something called the cotton candy universe. So what else can food be? What other role can food play in our life? With the advent of innovative new sensing technologies, I also started to think about how food could be used as an interface for technology. And this, if you go to the next slide, is an example of how I started to think about the means of creating food and how those methods and gestures could be used as a controller for larger immersive experiences. So I developed this piece called the cotton candy theremin. If you know a theremin, it's a musical instrument that you play with your hands using radio waves, and it oscillates and creates sort of incredible otherworldly sounds. And when I looked at that instrument being played, I started to think about, oh, it's the same gestures as when we spin cotton candy. So could you go to the next slide, please? You'll see that the cotton candy theremin, which is pictured on the upper right-hand side here, as well as the bottom right-hand side, was wired with an array of infrared sensors around its perimeter. So when you spin the cotton candy, the sensors are capturing that data and controlling a projected sugar crystal world, which is on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. And so you spinning cotton candy in the middle of this 71-foot immersive dome, you become, the interface, the controller of this sugar crystal world. So this became known as the cotton candy universe. And we can see a small video of it on the next page. You can press play there. You think that video plays? Maybe not. No video. Okay, does not work. You can also, everyone out here, as this technological difficulty happens, forgive me, you can also go to my website, which is my name, emiliebaltz.com, and see some of these in action. So we'll go to the next slide quickly. On the next page here, so some of the work that I've done also for brands over the years has been in the entertainment space. This is an event that I created alongside Milk Studios in New York City and a variety of different collaborators for a new venue that is opening, sponsored by Lexus. And this venue was supposed to embody the themes of intersection, of different cultures coming together, food, beverage, hospitality, arts, culture, to create a new definition of travel that Lexus is dedicated to. And so the event was supposed to create buzz and excitement, and we thought about being inspired by a magical secret garden. So how could we create a sense of unknown and a sense of discovery in a totally new space? So you'll see on the next slide that the entire space was transformed with flora and fauna. You see these beautiful vegetal plants, some succulents overtook the entire space. And so you walked into something that looked and also smelled like it was growing through live ingredients. The stairs were covered, grew up into the second floor. There was a theme of water feeding all this growth, which on the top right-hand side, you see a really beautiful interactive dance floor by an artist named Future Wife. And then that water transformed and grew into an ice geode, which you see on the bottom right-hand side here, which if you go to the next slide, you'll see was located in the center of the space. And this was wired with sensors, so when you touched it, it would change light and sound. So it was an interactive musical instrument, inspired again by this theme of transformation, of water feeding growth. And that ice served as the kind of main sculptural element that I created in collaboration with an artist duo named Dave and Gabe, who are also pictured, one half of them in the upper right-hand side there. And then the ice itself was then also displayed in another scenario as edible kakigori, so a Japanese shaved ice dessert that looked completely white to the sight, but actually had a really beautiful mezcal coconut flavor to it, something that was quite earthy and rich and tropical in flavor that played with our perception, you know, added a real sense of depth to something that looked quite untasting. So you see here that though there's only one little bit of food in this, the entire event is inspired by all of our senses and how we can transform experience by bringing, you know, natural materials into the space, also introducing technology into unexpected materials like large format ice, and then also being able to ingest that. So a full cycle of experience from seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, and then also eating. On our next slide, this is a project that went a little bit around the world. It was created in 2013. You'll see these are all recent projects, as I said, from the last 10 years, which I really got interested, as I said, in digital technology and how sensing technology could also create these new stories of food, how food could be used in other unexpected places and in unexpected ways. And part of that was a shared interest with an artist and collaborator of mine, Carla Diana, who now runs the 4D program at Cranbrook University in Michigan, and a composer, Aaron Dyer of Buchan Gase, a really great band. And we were interested in exploring, you know, how could food quite literally be used as an instrument for play. So you'll see on the next slide here that we created the world's first lickable ice cream orchestra. So this is a series of rapid prototyped ice cream cones, inside of which are capacitive sensors. Capacitance measures the resistance of the material. And then we placed little cups of ice cream inside of that. Guests were asked to pop into these pedestals, you know, the design of those being so much that you couldn't actually use your arms ever. So you were forced to just lick. This was also contextually placed in a gallery setting. So the white pedestals were a little bit of a riff on traditional art galleries, people popping up through that, a bit of a provocation and a commentary on old busts, you know, kind of neoclassic or Greco-Roman carved busts of people. And here they're being asked to perform one of the silliest acts, which is quite literally to lick ice cream in public. And every time they licked, they would trigger a different musical tone. And so by licking, they were able to compose a very fun musical piece together, playing with their bodies, playing with their tongues, playing with their food. I don't know if this video will play. If it does, let's try. It will not. You will also go to emiliebaltz.com and watch that. So here are some projects, as I said, that are more on the entertainment side. I also have worked with different cultural institutions to do exhibits. We'll go to the next slide and you'll see an example of that. So from 2011 to 2014, I was the creative director at the Museum of Sex in New York. And I actually started with them by developing food and beverage properties. I went on to design different exhibitions, to redo the brand, develop strategic partnerships, and transformed it more into a cultural and community space than it ever had been before. So exploring how museums could also be venues for experience, not just the dissemination of information or the collecting of artifacts. You'll see that one of the main ways that we did it at that time, which is the precedent for, I think, what the institution has become to this day. On the next slide, you'll see is the food and beverage property that I developed. It's also called play. You'll see this is a main theme in my work. And this was designed around the idea of transformation, of how could we start to give permission to people to play with their bodies within the context of such a provocative cultural space. You know, everyone hears a museum of sex and goes, "Ooh, what will happen?" You would look at a lot of artifacts, you learn about human sexuality, but there is no real safe space to practice that within the space, and justifiably so. So how could a space like the restaurant, here you'll see pictured, there's a bar in the back, and then kind of this idea at the bottom right-hand side of these booths, these more intimate spaces between stacks of bookshelves, kind of inspired by the stacks of a library. The interior architect for this was Eric Mailander of Resistance Design. And so we brought in this 19th century bar, which you see pictured here, which would transform at night by illuminating with some integrated digital experiences. And on the next page, you'll see the food and beverage menu was completely designed all around different textures and flavors that were inspired by acts of intimacy. So things that would crunch, things you could bite, things you could lick, things you could sniff. So there's a real tactility and kind of golden jewel tones to the experience that would allow people to get more into their bodies, and also different gestures that would allow them also to kind of subtly reenact gestures of intimacy, outside of a bedroom. How could those be experienced in a safe space? So these are all suggestions that went into the menu planning. On the next slide, you'll see we also had a little cafe in the front that offered a coffee bar and some fun, different food design here on the bottom right-hand corner, cookies that you could put your fingers through, small little playful details that allowed you to play very lightly with your food. And again, carry on that suggestion of being able to do things with your food that you normally couldn't. On the next slide, we'll see this is an installation from 2018, which was part of the Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum's Senses exhibition, exploring how design came to be beyond just vision. So this is an interactive video installation called Flavor Factory that allows visitors to remix their perceptions of taste by manipulating a series of these really large-scale gauges that control the visual appearance and the sound of these oversized sweets. So you'll see on the next slide a series of these large-scale control, these gauges here, that when you turn them, transform an ice cream cone into fur, bananas into maggots. A really playful way to think about how our perception of sight can affect our emotional relationship to taste. So something that looks so delicious as an ice cream cone, what happens if the material shifts? Is it still as delicious? This posed the question and allowed people to play with that. And there were matching sounds that went along with it just to deepen the immersive experience. These renders were done in collaboration with a wonderful artist and designer, Berk İlhan, Turkish, located also in New York. And just a great collaborative experience. I shot all of the video and then also programmed it in combination with Volvox Studio and Josh Korn. And Ant Food Studios did the sound design for this. So one of the reasons I love doing this kind of work in food and also in multisensory design is because of the collaborative nature, just how many people it takes to make something. And the way that ideas develops within that context is one of my great loves. On the next slide, you'll see more of the exhibit itself. If you haven't been to the Cooper Hewitt in New York City, it's a beautiful old mansion. So it has this incredible interior design, ornate, of yesteryears, America's version, nothing close to European, but for New York City, it is a little piece of heritage. So really interesting to bring kind of modern form and also modern experience into the museum space. If any of you work within the cultural sector, You'll also understand the challenges of within traditional museum going experience. To introduce food and beverage is very high risk because of all of the temperature control, as well as the archives and collection standards that go on in most major institutions. The Cooper Hewitt, being part of the Smithsonian, is one of those. So one of the questions was in this show, how could we speak to a food experience, obviously it being one of our most sensory experiences, how could we speak to that without having any kind of perishable, any kind of food or real beverage, because that wasn't allowed. So that's the rationale behind developing a more visual piece for this, but still to continue to have that conversation about our senses and perception in food without actually having to worry about any of the infrastructure that had to go around it. On the next slide, you will see another video that you will go to my website and watch. We'll go to the next slide. I also have worked traditionally in hospitality and food design, and also non-traditionally in hospitality and food design. For a while, as you see the Museum of Sex, I opened the play bar with them, and actually we had a prototype before that. Prior to that, I also worked very closely with chefs in New York City to creative direct, develop, and open a variety of different restaurants and eating spaces. You'll see some more recent ones here because I have limited time. So these are also more so from the last 10 years, but I would say since about 2004, I've been working. I worked actually quite traditionally in bars and restaurants, which also laid a groundwork for my deep respect of all culinary operations. On the next slide, you'll see some work that I did for the TED conference in collaboration with Target, the brand, to design. Target annually hosts a design-driven dinner. So to promote design at TED, which is one of the greatest conferences, I think, globally, of the sharing of new ideas, brands want to be have a presence there, but also foster dialogue and conversation. What better way to do that than through the act of eating and drinking together? So this dinner was inspired by the word para prosdoki. And if anyone speaks Greek, excuse me for butchering it. But this word means against expectation. And it's a multi-course meal of a series of dishes that played with perception, gathered around a really circular table to foster, a sense of collaboration and communication. If you can go to the next slide, you'll see a bird's eye view of that dining table. This was designed by David Stark Productions, located in Brooklyn, New York, just a really excellent event producer and experienced designer, who I worked with to develop the meal here, and they developed all of the scenography. This is a custom table design. So was able to host also this symbolic act of all of us coming together. And through that coming together, how could we start to shift our perspectives in the design industry, which obviously, is one of the greatest creators of culture, of commerce, and also has an opportunity to create commentary. So you'll see how we brought that to life, again, in a playful way on the next slide. I designed this meal that was meant to play with our perception. So the intro course here was a clear gazpacho with a series of words. So the sentence was written around the table, eat your joy. And guests were invited to pour, clear tomato water on top of this deconstructed gazpacho, not decomposed, excuse me, and literally eat part of that sentence. That was followed up by sort of an abstract plating, like, is food art, was a question beneath that, which you see at the bottom left-hand side, this kind of abstractly plated salmon dish, along with a side of an asparagus paintbrush. So these pieces that are meant to be in the language of popular culture, Target being a popular culture brand, one of the great American brands, but very mass market general audience. How could we play with perception within this design language? So inversing what a paintbrush normally looks like and making it suddenly edible, or taking here at the end seemingly a beautiful green apple, and this was designed to then, when you cut into it, that it is filled with a beautiful savory apple mousse. On the next slide, you'll also see a way to continue different conversations. And this is the last piece that I will share with you today, which in the same way is looking at dinner as a form of possibility for conversation and for transformation. This is a dinner that I did for General Electric at the dinner was located in the new lab in Brooklyn. And this was to create a conversation for executives around the transformative possibilities within food and technology. And everything that you'll see that's pictured on this meal was sourced and grown from urban agriculture, all located from within 500 feet of the dinner's location. So the Brooklyn Navy Yard is it's an industrial shipyard in Brooklyn that has been transformed into a platform for new venture acceleration. So all sorts of new technologies are being developed, one of those being urban agriculture. So this was really looking at how does the future of food in cities come to life? What does it mean for our human relationships? What does it mean for the flavors? But also what does it mean for the advancement of technology and innovation, which is what this group of leaders was focused on. And if we can look at the next slide, you'll see some images of how that came to life. So everything was sourced, and the guests actually helped. They didn't know they were helping to source some of them, but we went on like a little harvesting journey through some of the urban ag projects there, which you'll see here. Beautiful, urban greens that are being grown on the left there. And the entire meal was all vegan and served to guests, and allowed them to come together to eat, basically like eat their locale, from some really beautiful roasted tomato dishes to roasted cauliflowers, zucchinis, infused waters. And then at the end, we finished with, as one should, a bit of a spectacular liquid nitrogen dessert that, ended in really wonderful toasting together. So I will leave you with all of this because I know I'm at time today, and just invite you, again, as I said, a lot of additional work is on my website, but to leave you also with a prompt of, continuing to explore our own creativity and food as a platform for telling new stories between ourselves as well as our culture and our societies. Thank you again. I wish I could be there in person. And I just want to thank all of the leaders of this festival. It's just an incredible thing to be part of. And thank you so much for continuing to do what I can imagine is huge labor. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Emilie. How do you pronounce your name?
It's Emilie.
No.
Emilie.
Emilie. Well, whatever. The main thing I want to say is that we miss the videos because of the technical problem, but everybody can get into your web, which is emiliebaltz.com, and I will do it immediately because I want to see more about you. I think you did a beautiful presentation on your projects and your activities, and I like Orchestra. I think it's a funny project, licking ice cream and the sounds. It reminds me of Philly Glass or something. It's like an incredible thing. And then how do you mix or how you introduce the ideas of sound and food, sex and food, and play and food? So I think you play all the tools with food, and that's a beautiful thing you're doing. So thank you very much. And let's go to see your website and see the videos. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emilie. Thank
Bye-bye.
you very much. Bye-bye.